Operations Committee meeting to order. It is Canada Day for any Canadians amongst us.
And while we're doing announcements at the beginning, Jan, did you have anything to say regarding a particular member of the community in the room right here?
I need to call out the public.
I will. I would like to note that we have a 30-year veteran as our clerk, our chief clerk, with us today. Today is the day. Yeah. Do you want to say a few words?
Not really.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Has it almost been 30 years? 30 years as clerk, 35 years total.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your very long service. Thank you. Okay. So changes to the agenda. Our county clerk, Maureen Reynolds, is here, and after we do minutes, I'm going to invite her to join us. And I know there've been some questions about what's going on at the DMV. So we're going to get her in for a couple of things before we go with the regular agenda. And I have several things I'm going to talk about under my committee chair report, but we'll get to those eventually. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Okay, just so you know, sitting up here, so this is a little bit.
And just so you know, it does cut in and out like it was doing last night.
Oh, okay. All right. We do have one comment from the public. Robert Lynch is here from Enfield, and I think you know the general rules for speaking. We'll have about 3 minutes, so thanks for being here.
Good afternoon and welcome home, back to the legislative chambers. It's good to be here. I wanted to commend a good idea, and it was an idea that was raised at the last meeting in early June by our chair, Amanda Champion. And it was, should we have a legislature code of conduct? And I want to say, I think it would be a great idea. Now, I got this quote from the last meeting from Chair Champion. There's a nebulous space for legislators. We're employees of Tompkins County, but we're elected officials. And we kind of have to navigate that line of how we treat each other as coworkers. Rich John said later in the meeting, I think a code of conduct would be a good starting point, a good document for us to think further about how we want to run our meetings and how we want to relate to each other. I agree. I think that you ought to think very seriously about a code of conduct. We've got 5 new members of the legislature coming in January, and they're going to have to be oriented, and we want to start them off on the right foot. I think one of the things that I would like to see in a code of conduct is some firm rules regarding political activity in and outside of legislative meetings. I think there are bounds, there are appropriate bounds, and I'm not going to define them here. But I think that it would be wise to know what we say in meetings and how we influence legislative decisions. For example, several meetings ago, one member, I won't mention whom, lobbied on the floor of a legislative meeting for the election of 2 school board members. And another member of the legislature faulted her for it. I think it would be wise to know in advance whether that's appropriate or not, so that we eliminate any question in the future. Code of conduct, I think would be a wise thing to do. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I don't believe there's any other comments, public on Zoom or anything? No, there's not. Okay. Let's do the minutes of June 3rd. Can somebody move that? Rich, second. Dan, seconds. Any questions or comments about the minutes? All right, it's great. I can just like look at you and all right, let's all in favor of approving the minutes. Your names. All right, so that passes unanimously. All right, Maureen, you want to come up? And Maureen did send me an email earlier today because Ann Corman had sent her a message about having some questions. Some constituents have been asking about the DMV and the situation there. So I guess I'm just going to turn it over to you and you can summarize
So I
what.
wasn't sure of the constituent questions.
I wasn't either. It was
Okay.
from Annie and I don't know.
So with the executive order, were turned over last week. I was on vacation. And all of a sudden people want to open the doors to the DMV to the public. We have 5,000 appointments already booked through the rest of the month. These are people that took the time to make the appointments, that expect to come in at a certain time and get waited on. We have been allowing walk-ins the whole time. We just never publicized it because I can't be overrun and then make people with appointments wait. So generally when they get to the door, we ask them, what they're here for. I look inside and if, I always say Disney Fast Pass first. If you have an appointment, you get to come through. And we get them in, then I go through every person in line, see what they need. And sometimes the line gets long with walk-ins too. And I'll say, look, the wait's about 20 minutes right now. You can either come back or you can sit in your car. We can call you, or you can use our drop box. And what we do is you put it in the box, we process it that day, we call you that day or the next morning to come pick up your stuff. So it's really been working well. I do not want to open the doors to the public wide open yet. We are low staffed. We just hired 2 new staff. They started on Monday, and we'll have to hire 1 more in August. And by then we can, look at opening the doors and not going from the appointment system. But the appointment system works really well too. Your appointment's at 12:05, you come in at 12:05, you wait a couple minutes maybe, and you're processing in and out. So I met with all the regional county clerks today because we're all having the same problem on what we're supposed to do. And so some clerks have said they've designated certain individuals, clerks, to wait on appointments and some on walk-ins and just, so that the appointments get first priority. We answer the phone there 4 hours a day, 8:30 to 12:30. The phone rings all day nonstop. Most counties don't answer, so we're answering the phone to other counties' constituents. So it takes a lot of time. And if we had a person on the phone all day, we can't get our work done. So we're processing, between 200 and 300 deals from McGuire's every week, every dealer in town that comes in. We're doing the Dropbox, we're doing the 250 appointments a day and answering the phone, answering the emails, answering the Facebook messages. So we're just trying.
Yeah. Thank you. Lisa.
And just to put Maureen's comments into context of how we're operating across the county with all of the departments. So as you're aware, things changed midstream in terms of we were having the departments take a deliberate approach to reopening and creating plans to open their doors, staff back up, ramp back up. And in the midst of that, the governor lifted all of the restrictions. And so we had received some plans back, not all yet. And so what we did last week was, or I think it was last week, I'm losing track. We had a meeting with department heads saying that we would like, for many departments, they had been open business as usual throughout the pandemic, others appointment only, and lots of different permutations. So for many departments, it was a pretty easy lift to just open completely. For others, there had to be more steps taken, and we just wanted to know the status and understand the exceptions if departments are not completely open, why and what is the plan. So that's where we are. Maureen and I spoke about this, and she explained to me the plan for the DMV, and we issued a press release, explaining the staff shortages and with the hope that, and the goal being that once they're fully staffed and trained, they will be open to the public, but to just let legislators and the public know of not only DMV, but all of our department statuses. That's what the approach we're taking.
And one of the things I fear too is the line at DMV when it gets long is most DMVs have security guards. And I can do that fine in the afternoon, but then I just have one staff in the morning. You know, it's not fair for them to have to play security guard to tensions when the lines are long, so.
Yeah, and I was going to bring that up. Something you mentioned in your email was about, and I guess not here, but in other DMVs, people have been getting into fights,
Just fights, yeah,
fist fights
just fights. Yeah.
in line.
Yes. Last week in
So-
Cortland at the drive-through there, they were laughing. We had a meeting today. You know, you go to McDonald's, they can figure out the drive-through there. At the DMV in Cortland, they couldn't. And one woman got out, was trying to budge in and got out and sprayed the other one with the windshield wiper fluid. So, yeah.
So the lesson there is just if public could continue to have patience as we've been asking throughout
we-
the pandemic.
And we've really come up with creative ways. I mean, the drop boxes that day or the following day, or, you know, just if we can get you in, we will. We just don't want to overwhelm the office with a huge line of people.
Right.
So we're working on it.
Leslie?
Thank you for the update. I'm just wondering, just to keep residents up to speed, what would you recommend they do? Are we going to continue with appointments? Should they continue to book appointments? Should they?
They should for now for the appointments that take a long time, like the learner's permit testing, because we only have 2 stations. So it's for CDL testing or the kids getting their licenses. Also in August, we get really busy when Cornell comes back to town and we do reciprocity. So they bring down their license and they have to exchange it for New York State license and all their vehicles. So those are 45 minutes to an hour appointments just for one person. So it can really hold up a line. So we'd like to keep appointments for that, for the enhanced license, because it requires so much documentation and scanning and different steps, and the real ID license. Otherwise, we're pretty flexible. And like I said, since the beginning, if you come to the door and people will say, I need to get to work tomorrow. I'm like, okay, come on in. You know, so we've been doing this the whole time. So it's not like we weren't letting people in. We've been doing it the whole time. I just want to put it out there that we're open and then get flooded.
Yeah, no, it sounds like the appointment system is working. 'Cause
People love it,
know
yeah.
when to show
Yeah,
up and
yeah.
they're going to be helped. So, Leslie, did
So
you?
just one follow on. So how far out are you all booking in general?
I think we're at the end of July right now.
Okay, so people should get on board if they need to get in there. And then lastly, do we have good information on the web just to kind of guide people that the hours are open, these hours to make telephone call, all of this stuff is just easy so folks should visit the
It
website.
is, they'll still call and ask.
Thank you.
And the DMV Facebook page is very active, so we could all be sharing that information, you know, with our networks as well.
There's one thing I haven't put on there when the executive orders turned. The licenses are no longer been extended. They've been expired. So I think we're going to have a rush on that because people have been letting it ride. And there's been no notice in the press about this. So I'm sure the police know. So.
I've got Rich and then Annie.
Yeah, Maureen, thank you. I think this is some indication of what a cool place you've made our DMV, that everybody wants to be there and hang out. So,
I know, I should sell ice cream, don't you think? I think so.
and I guess my view is do the best you can. You'll get it open. It'll work.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
That's what, I want people to be patient.
I'm curious about the licenses. So if your license expired, you were allowed to continue using it, but that's run out now.
Yes.
Is there an announcement we should make at the next legislature meeting to make the public aware of that?
Let me get you something and then we will, but the press have definitely not leapt onto it yet. And like I said, I just got back Monday from vacation and then I got all this on me and I just remembered that had happened too, so.
Yeah, it would be a good thing to get out, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Annie on Zoom.
Hi, Ann.
Hi, thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Maureen. So yeah, I wasn't clear in the questions, but I just thought there was like kind of, you might have a general update. So I appreciate, as other people have said, all the flexibility trying to get through this. So some of the questions that I had were, for instance, right, if you were going to transfer, you're buying a new car, how could you wait for that? But so I appreciate you sending the copy of the press release. I hadn't seen that came out the 28th. So that spells it out. So for instance, it seems, and you clarified it a little bit more here. So for instance, if I bought a new car or transferring the plates from one car to another, that sounds like a thing you would show up. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can show up and if the line's too long, we have a drop box because some people don't want to wait. They don't want to wait in long lines, so.
Okay, right, because
We
that's
we
not
offer you
the,
at the door. Well, I'll say the line is like 20 minutes long. Is that something you're willing to wait for? Or can I
Okay.
just call you later and pick it up?
okay, all right. So this is great information because I just didn't really have information and, and this is good to know about, the staffing levels. And it seems like you might be up to full staffing. Would we say possibly September? I mean, is that what you're anticipating? I know you
That's
can't
what we're
guarantee.
anticipating. Yeah.
Okay, so this is more information that we can be able to tell the community. So
Yeah, with the appointment process, we could handle the reduced staffing a little bit because we knew when people would be on vacations, we wouldn't schedule appointments for those people. So now for us to just lose it, it's kind of overwhelming.
Sure. And then, as I said, so to be able to get out, so I wasn't clear. So if people have their license expired or car registration expire, is that really expired now? We don't have any conditions that are allowing leeway on that?
The car registrations, that ended a couple months ago. So they let the licenses go until, I thought it was gonna be mid-July, but then with the executive order ending, that cut that back as of
They
last week.
cut that
so.
back. Okay, so then the car registration has already ended, so I better get on it. No, just kidding. Thank you. Thank you very
You're welcome.
much.
Yep,
Appreciate it.
sure.
Thanks, Annie. Any other questions for Maureen? Well, as Rich said, thank you. You'll get through it. And I think
Yes, I will. My battle scars are there. I got them.
you guys have always done a really good job. You've been like #1 in the state, so you will continue to be.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming in person. All right, we're going to move on to Jay Franklin from Assessment, who has a couple of things he's going to talk to us about on Zoom.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yep, we can hear you and see you.
All right. Perfect. So I just wanted to go through a couple of topics today. The first one being just a summary of real property tax legislation that occurred this year at the state level. Just nothing really noticeable, but just to kind of touch base real quick on this. Included in the budget bill this year was a notification for when a solar, wind, or alternative energy developer is planning a project. They need to send out a letter of their intent to build to the different taxing jurisdictions in order for those taxing jurisdictions to require a pilot. It's the most convoluted thing out there. We would get a copy of the letter once in a while. It would go to different departments. We never really saw it. I don't know the last time I actually saw one of these things. So one good thing that came out of the budget bill is that we could enact a local law, which would state that we are going to require a pilot for solar installations over X megawatts, and that way putting people on notice rather than trying to comply with a 60-day notification period. So I don't know if that's something that you would want to do. It would be something that I would want to do because I don't want to have to keep trying to track these things down, and I wouldn't want to see a solar installation pop through and become exempt, like I think a couple just did up in the town of Clay. There was an article about that. So this would be a way just to kind of push solar developers to the IDA. And if I could ask for a straw poll, is this something that you would want to see me bring back for consideration at the next meeting?
Well, let me ask if there's questions about it or comments. Dan?
Jay, I know you always introduce this kind of thing by saying that you don't take a stance one way or another in favor of these exemptions or many of the rules as well. Can you just tell us what we should do, please?
Yes, you should pass this. This is more an administrative topic. So this will just solve me trying to track down when a solar developer is going to build something. Then I got to get Lisa's signature on a letter, try to figure out who to send it to. This will just solve a lot of our administrative issues, and then the real debate on whether solar installations need a pilot and at what level that all can go to the appropriate people.
Then, yes, if you're in favor of it, I'm in favor of it.
Rich?
Yeah, speaking as a GO member and as an IDA member, this does seem to make sense. Do you have an idea what you'd put in for that X on the megawatts?
I would put 1. Just that's going to get you more to an industrial solar and will move you away from any smaller installations which may be utilized on site. But even with that, let's just say you're going to require a pilot. That pilot, you could never come to an agreement on something that is 1 megawatt or 2 megawatts if you didn't want it. It's really just putting people on notice. And luckily, we've had an IDA that has taken up these pilots. So it's a way to keep these projects paying something without finding a loophole to be exempt.
So, Rich, you would be in favor?
I think so.
As a-
Yeah, it might make sense to check with Heather McDaniel, just get her view. But I would think she'd agree as well that from a process standpoint, it makes sense to do this.
Yeah, and the pilot that we're talking about, we could require a pilot through our own mechanisms and not have to go to the IDA. So this just kind of puts people on notice that, hey, we're going to require it, but there's a better option over here at the IDA. So I'm pretty sure Heather would be in favor of this.
I would think. Yeah.
Jonathan?
To be clear, Jay, 1 megawatt would be approximately about 5 acres of a solar farm, right?
Yes, give or take an acre.
Yeah, okay.
Leslie, did you have any thoughts?
So how many would you say we have right now in the county that would meet that threshold?
20. I'd say kind of 15 to 20, because if you look at Cornell's, they're on 5 different parcels, but it's really 1. So there's 20 between those, or 10 between those 2 sites. There's 5 or 7 in Newfield, a couple in Enfield. We have the 5 megawatt in Lansing now. So yeah, I'd say 20.
I'm just wondering if 1 megawatt is a bit small. I'd love to, when we're thinking about it, I'd like to understand, how you would calculate that and what would be the threshold and why. I think we'd need a little more kind of detail to support that.
I'll work that up when I bring it back.
Okay, so it sounds like folks are in favor of having you bring this back to us, and you're recommending that we should do this. So I'm recommending that we listen to Jay.
All right, sounds good. We can continue that throughout this meeting. We'll be good to go.
All right, well, you've got more going, so.
All right, so the next one just kind of shows how ludicrous some things that the state passes really is. This would allow us to accept late exemption applications up until July 15th. This legislation hasn't been delivered to the governor yet, and we would have to pass a local law if we wanted to do so. So even if he signed it today, we couldn't really do anything on this. So it was a good thought when it was passed, but it's not timely.
Okay, questions on that one from anyone? Nope. Rich?
Just for clarity, you say we are confident that we got most people to reapply for their exemptions for the 2021 roll. And I read that as the failure of New York State to get this done, you're thinking won't have tremendous impact here in Tompkins County because you've reached most people.
Correct. We've been open, our normal hours here. The state did allow seniors and the low income disability exemptions to roll over. So we really just kind of had all of the oddball housing trusts, clergy, exemptions, and then the ag land. And I don't think anybody had an issue. We allowed ag lands to apply up until grievance day. So almost 3 months later than normal because we were still in a state of emergency and the pandemic was considered a natural disaster. So we allowed 3 months of late application. So we're good, I think.
Okay, go ahead, Jay.
The next one, there is a conservation easement in the town of Danby. It's passed both houses, hasn't been delivered yet. I honestly didn't know this was happening. I knew the town of Danby was talking about a conservation easement, but I was never a part of this legislation. It's kind of odd. If it's passed and if it's signed by the governor, the county could actually pass this and provide for an exemption for conservation easements just in the town of Danby. And I'm going to say I don't think that's a good practice. But if it's something that the county would want to look into providing an exemption for conservation easements, I can work with Assemblywoman Anna Kellis's office to provide this sort of legislation, but to allow the county to be able to offer it to all of our municipalities and not just one.
And that would probably make your work easier, right? Instead of having just one municipalities doing different things.
It is, but we can juggle, we manage it. I just don't think it's fair that the county can provide an exemption for somebody in Danby, but not offer that same exemption to somebody in Caroline. If it's good for one, it's good for all. So if we want to move forward, I can work with Assemblywoman Kellis's office and get that moving along and come back with a resolution to urge that to happen.
Okay, I have Leslie and then Rich.
So if we think it's a model practice, then we should probably build it so that it applies across the entire county. I agree. If we want to make sure that we have all the parameters and that regardless of which municipality it's in, it would work in those municipalities, understanding what that means from a text standpoint would be really helpful. If we look at all of the areas that would be potentially impacted today, that would be also helpful.
Rich?
Yeah, it sounds like we, GO, need to make a decision to give you some direction on this. It might be useful to have just a little bit more explanation of transfer of development rights and what's entailed in that.
Okay. I can come back with a little more in-depth presentation on it. And hopefully by then, the governor would have signed it.
That sounds great. Jonathan?
Jay, are you talking about as an exemption for the holder of the easement or the property owner on which the easement is?
It's an exemption for the property owner who transferred those development rights, in this case, to the town of Danby only. So if they did it in perpetuity, they would receive a 90% exemption. I think if it's 15 to 29 years, it's only a 50%, but I could be wrong on that 50%. But depending on the length of the easement, it's a different exemption amount.
So the exemption is not really on the conservation easement, it's on the property which is subject to the conservation easement.
Correct, yeah.
Dan?
I have two questions. So when you're talking about considering efforts to make this county-wide, so when Danby did this, or what Danby has in mind, is not just, is it county taxes, town taxes, both?
The way the legislation reads is that if the town of Danby offers this exemption, then the county and the school districts within Danby can then offer it to Danby property owners. We couldn't offer it to parcels outside of Danby. So we could get a new exemption statute, which would allow us to offer the same conservation easement to all of the towns and villages within the community.
Wouldn't that be requiring the towns to do something that they haven't decided they want to do?
No, because we could offer it just for county tax purposes.
Okay.
And then if the towns wanted to do it for town purposes, and if the schools wanted to do it for their purposes, then, you know, everybody has the option to allow it or not for their own taxing purposes.
I see,
No,
thank you.
yeah, one, you know, if we offered it, it wouldn't affect the school or the town unless they chose to do it.
I see, thank you. And then my next question is, what does this last part mean, the last sentence mean? That it will create subdivided parcels that are not in zoning compliance?
Yeah, so when a conservation easement is on a parcel, the legislation directs me to create a separate tax parcel just for the area that's under a conservation easement. So if you think of a parcel that has small road frontage, there's a house on the road front and they're going to protect all of the rear land. This will require me to create a parcel without any road frontage, which will be out of compliance for zoning compliance. And it's minuscule in the grand scheme of things, but headaches in the short term.
Thank you.
Leslie?
So just one more question. The way it reads, it seems that development rights can only be transferred to the town of Danby. If the county, for example, wanted to work with some land banking, happen to be in the town, this wouldn't carry through for the county to also have the same right. It's only for transfer development rights to the municipality of the town of Danby. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay.
In one that I would bring back to you, it would be more general in order to allow, in my mind, or organizations such as the Finger Lakes Land Trust to hold that easement, and then the property owner would be entitled to an exemption. And that way it doesn't force us to have the town's conservation board approve something. But that's just kind of my thought to begin with.
Great. We should move on to the next one, but it sounds like folks are interested in this and we'll look forward to some more information from you when you get it to us.
The next one, the state finally did something about the dark store that we've been talking about, and they've defined comparable sales cost and rental selection for commercial and mixed use properties. This really doesn't do anything, but the state legislature felt they could do something. You know, it's trying to state what is a comparable property. So they have to be similar in size, use, age, condition, but we don't have a lot of different properties. So we have to move outside of our jurisdiction. You have to make adjustments for age and condition. This would make us find the exact duplicate property that's sold or a rental amount. And it's going to cause a lot more confusion than clarity. But I guess the state legislature did something about it. So, but we're still pushing for a dark store theory focus group at the state level to pass meaningful legislation about this.
Questions or comments about this one? All right, thank you.
And the last one, the state is now dictating which income tax year that we use. So for our 2022 senior and low income disability exemptions, we're going to have to use income from 2020 as opposed to 2021. But that's only for the senior exemption. For the low income disability, we would still use 2021 income. They tried to clarify and make consistent, but they didn't make all of the exemptions that use income to be consistent. Just another thing we have to train the public on what income tax year we need. The big issue here is people who don't file an income tax will have to keep around their Social Security statements, their pension amounts, and keep it around one more year than what they're used to. So, but we'll work with them. Tammy's the best in the business tracking these things down. So we'll keep people eligible. But as I said, there's really not a whole lot of meaningful legislation that was passed.
Good to know. Question? Questions on this or anything else on this? Leslie?
So for the two items we've talked about that impact the senior community, have we determined what the best communication strategy is to make sure that, say, we haven't missed anybody on the re-up for assessment, or that folks will understand and keep their documents so that it's not a stressful time when this changes in 22?
Yeah, once this does get signed by the governor and when we send out our renewal applications, we'll work with our communications team now here. And I'm sure Dom will have some great ideas on how to get the word out. We do work with Lifelong, and we'll work with Lisa Monroe and Karen at COFA to get this notice out. But we do run our one-to-one match between our database of keeping track of who should apply and who has already applied. We send out reminder phone calls, reminder emails to people to try to get them in. So we're pretty confident that we'll get this done.
Thank you.
All right, great, thanks. Jay, you're next on our list as well.
All right. This is the one where you'll still agree with me in totality.
Yes,
but
definitely.
This one's a little difficult for me to come to you for. Not for any particular reason, but this work's getting difficult. So today we just filed our 2021 assessment roll, and we're looking forward to start working on our 2022 assessment roll. Our year starts and ends on July 1st, more or less. So as we're looking at the real estate market, how it compares to our current assessments, things are pretty crazy right now. And I think pretty much anyone can understand that. Anyone who's been in this business for longer than me has said they have never seen a real estate market like that here in Tompkins County. I have many examples of properties being listed 100,000 more than our assessment and selling for 70,000 more than that list price. We could probably increase everyone's assessment by 25% and we'd still be low in many cases. It's just a market that it's just snowballing right now. Add that in, we had 5 people leave our department at the end of 2020. We had 3 people take advantage of the early retirement incentive. I wasn't anticipating that departure so quickly. And it really has put us behind the 8 ball in terms of commercial valuation. We did hire an assistant real property appraiser to try to bring them up to speed, but unfortunately he left employment to move closer to his new house. So right now we just advertised for a commercial valuation specialist. I don't anticipate getting anyone. Quite frankly, our pay for that position is probably 2 to 3 times less than what they could make in the private sector. So most of that commercial valuation work is going to fall on to me to begin with. And we need more people in the office to train them in order to get them up to speed. It takes at least 2 years for an assistant real property appraiser to come up to speed, and experience is everything when it comes to the assessment field. You just have to have that feeling of what a value is, and you only get that through experience. Add in the complexity of properties, these large industrial solar facilities, that takes up a lot of my time. Battery storage facilities and how they add to value. We're starting to get air rights. And I just looked at the development plan for the conference center and immediately had a headache on figuring out how to record the city retaining ownership of part of that building. It's not something that we've done and just takes time to get through. In addition, we took over the pilots when I made the mistake of reading the actual law and said that the county should be the one taking over the assessing, or as the assessing unit, we should do the municipally granted exemptions. So, since 2000, we've lost 9.5 full-time equivalents in my office. And we've added, about 3,800 parcels, kind of like we added the town of Danby to our records here just in Tompkins, plus what we're doing out in the town of Covert. So as I say, we have a lot of work to do and we have too few people to do it. So in order for us to continue with a full value annual equity maintenance program, we need more staffing. And on the second page, I talk about what I need. I need at least 2 assistant real property appraisers and 1 data collector. I'd want to hire the 2 assistant real property appraisers as quickly as I can.
1 second, Jay. I think the memo that you're referring to was sent in an email.
Correct.
So I don't know if folks have that or have had a chance to look at it. So maybe just assume that we haven't all read the memo.
Yeah. So in order, if we were to continue with full value measurements, I need additional staffing in order to do that. We did hire 2 really good people over the last year and a half. But like I said, they just need time and experience to come up. We can't replace a 40-year commercial appraiser who was a real property tax director and a tax mapper. The knowledge and experience that Al had was probably 2 to 3 individuals, even when he was working part-time. We would need help, and I would want to hire those 2 positions as soon as we can. I hate coming to you, but in the middle of a budget year, but I also need to start working on the 2022 program now and would like some guidance as to what the 2022 budget may look like. There is an alternative pathway forward, and that is to go to a fractional assessment like we did in 2006 and 2007. I would still need more staff in order to get them trained and up to speed in order to do a revaluation, say for the 2025 role, in order for them to have their 2 years experience, become a full appraiser and move on. So I have different cost estimates for those. The full value assessment would bring me up to 13 individuals, would actually be about $265,000 more than our 2021 target was, but only $113,000 more than our 2020 target. The fractional assessment would more or less restore us back to our 2021 target. It's only about 9,000 more than what that figure was. Or about 160,000 more than what our 2021 target is. As you know, last year we took the 10.5% reduction to our budget, which ended up being, 2 staffing positions. So I guess really what I'm looking for now is a direction on which way to go. I wouldn't want to start making, 20,000 assessment changes. And then once the budget is approved in November, find out that we are not going to have the staffing to move forward. Or I don't want to not do the work and then find out in November that we had the staffing to do it. The best, most equitable, most fair way of doing the assessment function is to continue at full value annual reassessments. But that does come at a cost.
All right, thank you. So a lot of information, and I'm not sure that everyone had time to read the memo. But so let's have a few questions. I have Leslie and then Rich.
So thanks, Jay. I'd love to understand, there's a short paragraph on point 4 for the alternative path on the second page that has just a small sentence about maybe
volatility of the current real estate market, and perhaps that is not something that will continue. And that path forward with the multi-year approach could allow for some cooling of the market and something that might better reflect what's reasonable in an assessed change, because we're going to see some real huge jumps. I'm not sure people are ready for that. I'm pretty sure people are not ready for that, I should say. This is not about the staffing issue. I completely appreciate your staffing need. So I just am thinking more about the methodology and what might be, to your point of what's fair and equitable. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the annual that you think is, as far as equity or fairness over a multi-year assessment, particularly when we know that the current real estate market is quirky, maybe we could call it. I'd love to hear a little more.
Yeah, no, it's just crazy when, you know, I look at a house assessed 280,000, no listing and sold for 523,000. This is a 1,400 square foot, 1-bath, 3-bed house on Utica Street in the city of Ithaca. 523,000. You know, there was a house on Cornell Walk, assessed 400, listed 449, sold 8 days later for 610. 150,000 more than the listing price. It's the market right now is just ask for what you want and hope you're going to get 50 to 75,000 more. But oddly enough, I just did talk to somebody who sold their house in Fall Creek. They listed their house. They were hoping to get a lot more than their list price, but after 2 weeks, they took a full value offer at their list price. So I think that was just, you know, 5 houses, other houses came on the market and kind of moved through things. We're seeing, and these aren't all out of county buyers. There are a lot of local buyers, a lot of local real estate agents for whatever reason are buying houses nowadays. But this just isn't residential wise. We're seeing large commercial sales go through. You know, there's the city center development that just sold in the old Treblock building, $75 million. There's 202 bedrooms, so that's $350,000 per bedroom when you look at what that sold for. And that was just built a couple of years ago for $50 million. So they were able to get a 50% increase in their construction costs for this sale. The Lux and the Lofts in Collegetown just sold $63 million, about $224,000 per bedroom. But there's a lot of forces moving in our market right now. There's a lot of people made a lot of money during COVID. Low interest rates, people aren't looking for a big return today. We're seeing a lot of foreign investors that are looking to put money into American real estate. I talked to a lot of commercial owners around here who say they get approached at least on a weekly basis for value significantly more. But a lot of our local investors are looking to put money in their pocket at the end of the day. When we're seeing these institutional buyers, I think looking to put money in their pocket at the end of the holding period. And that's difficult for me to reconcile. I don't want to tell somebody that their property is worth more today because I think they'll be able to sell it more in 20 years. That may be an investment decision that they make, but I don't think that's something that I can do. I would have to look at what that income stream is and see what sort of value that should be. You know, another thing that I'm hearing from people coming into the market that it's very, very difficult to build here. You need to know the right people. You need to know how to manage through the different planning boards and being able to develop a project that, even though it may fit zoning, would be accepted by those making those decisions. So there's a lot of movement right now and something we've never seen. And one of my biggest concerns is a property that sold in February, you got a deal on that property when we look to value it as of today. So even properties that sold 5 months ago are worth more today than they were 5 months ago.
Leslie, you had one more?
So just a quick follow-up on the fair, equitable approach. My concern is actually for folks that aren't selling their property but want to continue to live here. And when their assessment is tied to those ballooning sale prices that may or may not be continual or realistic in post-COVID cooling market period, potentially, it's difficult. And that's who I'm mostly hearing from. The sales prices are astronomical. I can concur. I've tracked them myself. It is hard to value that. We want to make sure that you have the staff to do the job at hand, and it's obviously a growing job. But I'm just wondering about the annual approach at the moment.
The most fair and equitable way is a full value 100% appraisal process. Typically, higher price properties would appreciate at a greater level than the lower price properties. So if we don't adjust values to reflect that, those lower price properties will end up paying more than what they should be. And the higher price properties will end up paying less than what they should be. We see the articles about the unfair assessment structure in New York City and how the poor neighborhoods have a greater proportion of the tax bills than really what they should. So, you know, if we went to a 3-year, a lot of that unfairness isn't going to get to a point that'll make it really unfair. I would never want to see us go back to a 10-year cycle, but the most fair way to do it is annually, because then if the market does drop, we can easily respond to that too. I hate to say this, but at some point I would like to see the market drop here again so that my office can show that, yes, we will drop assessments. They don't just always go up. Our assessments go as the market goes. We did it through the 90s and decreased assessments, but I don't want to see that happen because that means our economy isn't good, things are bad, but it would be good for us to show that. But the most equitable way is still annually. Values may go up 1 year, values may go up 20%, but that also means that the county, the school, the city, the towns don't need 20% more money. So the tax rate should drop correspondingly in order to have everyone's taxes remain about the same, but their value goes up, tax rate goes down, the end result is the same.
Thank you. Rich, did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Okay, and then Dan.
When you're saying a multi-year reassessment cycle, does that mean you do some towns 1 year and then other towns the next and the city fits in, or are you trying to do something where you're having the assessments chase to a new level year by year?
It's a little different. What we would do is say for the 2022 roll, we would say we are valuing everyone at 80% of value. And everyone's market value increases by 20%, but their assessment doesn't change. The next year, if the market went up again, we would value at 70%. Everyone's value goes up, but their assessment doesn't change. Then in the third year, we say, all right, we're going to value everyone at 100%. We revalue every parcel in the county in that third year in order to bring them to 100%. So changing that level of assessment changes everyone's value, but without sending everyone a notice. And by applying the same percentage increase to everybody, you get to the majority of them. Some people will still be overvalued, some will be undervalued, but at least they'll stay equitably assessed where they are. And as tax rates go, their taxes shouldn't change dramatically because of an assessment increase.
And then the cost to switch to a fractional assessment is less than a full value reassessment. Is that because of what you were just saying, that you wouldn't have to send out notices?
We wouldn't have to send out postage. I also don't need the more people in the office today. We would be able to bring 2 new people on board, get them trained so that when we do that full revaluation in 3 years, they'll be able to handle the informal assessment reviews that we get.
So to do everything you'd want to do, full value assessments and do your full annual equity maintenance, you need 3 FTEs or more?
I need 3 FTEs. I need some project assistance, which is a small amount. I want to say 20,000 to handle those informals. There's some postage on there as well.
Dan?
I'm not sure I understand multi-year reassessment versus fractional assessment. Are they the same thing or totally different? I'm not sure I understand.
They're the same. You say multi-year because you're going to do a reval in the 3rd year. And it doesn't have to be a fractional value. If the market stayed level during those 3 years, we could not do any assessment changes and still be at 100%. But because the market increased so significantly between July 1 of 20 and July 1 of 21, we're going to need to make significant assessment increases this year in order to stay at 100%. Or we could say everyone's going up 20% and our level of assessment would move to 80% rather than 100. And then in year 3, we go to 100%.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question and we really should move on because we have quite a few other things to talk about. So my question is, if we chose to go to a fractional assessment this year, but in 2 years, we felt like we could, give you the staff and the resources that you needed, what would, like, if you started on a fractional assessment path, how easy is it to switch back?
Yeah, no, this fractional assessment path that I have in here is designed to give us 3 years to do a reval, and then we should be good with, if there aren't any further reductions in our staffing in order to continue on with an annual full value reassessment cycle at the end of those 3 years.
Okay, so it would give you that time and then with hopes that we would be back to full value. Okay. So you're looking for direction from us from today.
Yeah, I realize, you can't make any budget decisions here, but, we're starting our assessment roll year now. And I don't want to do more work than I need and then not have the funding to go forward, nor do I want to wait because of all the changes we're going to make and then find out that lo and behold, yeah, I could have stayed full value. I don't know a way forward, which is why I'm coming for help.
So let me ask my colleagues what your thoughts would be on which pathway do you prefer? Anyone? Bueller?
I have if I could ask a further question.
Sure.
How realistic is it that you could hire 3 qualified people and get them functional by the fall to get all this done if we said, no, we want full value and not multi-year?
It'll be rough, but I think if we can get them hired by October 1st, we'll have them trained enough to be able to sit through the informals. Our current staff would be able to value it. We had a plan to kind of change how we did our annual equity maintenance work. I would split the office into 2 groups and have Vang, Steve, and Irene focus on those annual equity changes. The rest of the staff focus on building permits. So we have a path forward, My biggest concern is being able to serve the public and the 3,000 informal reviews that I would anticipate in February and March. So with 5 months, that we could train the staff enough to handle those reviews.
Okay. Lisa, do you have an opinion?
Well, I think in conversation with Jay previously, I mean, I wouldn't want to dissuade if it was the will to go with full assessment, but in the training and experience and onboarding, the alternate path forward would allow for that period of time for everyone to come on board, be trained adequately, and bring us back up and allow the market to stabilize. So that was my understanding from talking with Jay, and it would allow timing wise for further discussion in the budget process. However, to Jay's point, for him to do the planning now, he's looking for some direction. But I think that from our previous conversation, that path forward seemed like a reasonable approach, the fractional assessment.
That would certainly seem to provide a cushion if you weren't able to hire or you lost another person in the department. It seems safer. Is that a fair assessment? I use the word assessment, sorry.
Yeah, it is. It pains me to even bring forward something that isn't full value assessments. I've always said we will continue to be at full value assessments for as long as I'm director. But Frank never told me that I'd have to run into COVID-19 and, end up dealing with that. So, I guess you gotta react. We were able to hire a couple great individuals and we'll get them up to speed. I'll poach banks again and hire more quality individuals and get them up to speed. And, we'll get forward, but it pains me to even mention something else than full value.
When is there a deadline where, say, if you go out there now and try to hire and you realize I'm not finding the people I really want, would you have to say, yeah, this isn't going to work? Is it now? Or is it 2 months from now? You mentioned October.
The last couple of hires we've had good quality candidates, and we've had to make a decision on which candidate to choose. I would anticipate that again. I would hope for that again. One of my concerns, I know I won't be able to hire a commercial valuation specialist, mainly because the county just doesn't have the capacity to pay for that. So.
But that wasn't my question. My question was, when could we say to you, it looks like you can do this, go to full valuation rather than do the multi-year? Is that August? Is it September?
September.
When do you need direction from us?
Probably September at the latest. We could put a 2-month delay. I could think of some projects we could move to the front that would need to be done regardless. So if we said September, that would be great.
So does it make sense for you to go test the market and see if you can find the people and make a decision at that point? But in the meantime, try to hire to do full valuation?
That's your suggestion?
Yeah, yes, it is.
That's my suggestion also.
Yeah. Go see if you can do it and report to us around September. And if it doesn't look like it's working, we will then say, go to partial valuation. Does that make sense?
So you're suggesting that he go ahead trying to hire the 3 folks that he needs. If that isn't happening, to then we would do cutoff, Lisa.
So that would involve approving a target increase in his budget for this year and next year, which would entail approval by a resolution and approval by this committee, DCP and the full ledge, right?
If we want to preserve full value assessments, it seems like that's what we need to do. And it seems like there's real value to the county. And I note that unlike other counties in the state, you're doing the work for all the towns. So they're beholden to whatever decisions we make. And frankly, I like the idea that our assessment department holds the highest standards on behalf of all the towns and villages. I would favor us trying to continue to do full value assessments, which means, yes, move the resolution here. But if you can't hire, you come back to us in September and we say, okay, that didn't work. We need to go to partial.
Okay, and Dan, you're seconding that. Okay, Leslie, do you have an opinion?
I have a question. Lisa, what I thought I heard from you was that you were leaning toward the alternate model. Was I hearing that correctly when you spoke?
I really want, I want to, it's not that I'm dissuading, I really want to follow Jay's lead and guidance here. And if I would be in support, if he thinks that he can bring the staff on board. It was my understanding previously that it was going to take that time for training to ramp up anyway. But if that's not the case, then I would entertain this. Again, we're looking at what's happening here and in other departments that we've gone along, and the cuts in staffing are catching up with us midstream, and it's causing us to need to make these decisions to change or increase the target outside of the budget cycle. And typically I would say, let's wait and do it in the budget cycle. But this is another urgent or emerging need that is not part of the budget. So
Need to know. Okay, Leslie, do you have an opinion? Stick with full assessment and see how that process goes, or fractional?
I'll support your choice. You work with this, and this is your proposal, and I do appreciate that we have long kept a really tight ship for assessment, kind of statewide. I don't want to change the model if we don't have to, but I do think you brought up some good points if we wanted to think about an alternate role. But if you're trying to move forward, I can support that.
Okay, so you're also going with Rich and Dan. Okay, so I'll be the lone person to say, I think it would be okay and maybe make sense to go with the fractional plan for the next 3 years, but it sounds like I'm outvoted. So we're giving you the direction that you can go ahead, bring a resolution that we'll have to then talk about at the full legislature and go from there. And we do need to move on. Rich?
The one thing, it seems like we have a timing issue here. Should we pass a resolution with the language to follow?
I'll look to Lisa. Do you want us to do something today, or do you want to come back next month or Jay, with,
I think we can go to next month on this. I don't want to pass this much legislation with words to follow. I think it's a little more complicated. By the time we get and start recruiting for a position, that wouldn't end until the August meeting. So we can come in August, have that done, and then we'll be able to know if we did find those individuals. But I think this will at least provide direction and a start for us to continue on with full value. And we can always stop in September if that's the will of the legislature at that point.
okay.
And one more thing, I just wanted to put on the record, my thinking on this is influenced by our meeting last evening, where we looked at our fund balance, which is significant, and we have a substantial cushion to guide us through this, and also the information on sales tax, which does seem to be rebounding or returning to levels that we saw pre-pandemic. that makes me think, you know, without being able to predict the future, that we can afford to do this. So.
Great. And at our next legislature meeting, I will try to give a brief overview to our colleagues to say that this is coming. And I don't know how well I'll explain it, but I'll try. Thank you so much, Jay. This is a lot. Is there any last thoughts or items for us?
No, it's good to see you all together, even though you do look really tiny on my screen. So good to get back to normal.
Definitely. It is good to be in person. All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right, take care all.
All right. We're going to go to administration. We have a couple of resolutions. And let's see, we have appropriation from contingent fund, terminal pay, county administration, ID 10197. And do I move that? No, somebody else moves that. Leslie moves that, Rich seconds. And Lisa, anything you want to share with us about it?
It's fairly routine. It's for the terminal pay for the previous county administrator, as well as 2 other staff who left at the end of 2020.
Okay, questions? All right, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Resolution appropriation from contingent fund and authorizing county administrator to enter into consulting agreements for administrative and budgetary purposes. ID 10170. Can somebody move that? Rich, seconded by Dan. Thank you. Lisa?
So this is authorization for county administration to enter into consultant agreements with previous county administrator and soon to be previous budget coordinator for assistance in not only the upcoming 2022 budget preparation, but in the event that, you know, when a new county administrator comes on board for any necessary consulting and overlap there.
Okay, questions? All right, oh, Leslie?
Is this just for 21 or will this go into 22, do you think? It goes into 22. It's for not the calendar year, but a year's time frame.
Okay, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have several more discussion topics. So the first one is an update on our travel and training, legislator travel and training budget. You should have gotten this information, I think also on an email. So the way that we updated the rules last year, 2 years ago, I think, was that each legislator would have a certain portion of our travel and training budget for a given year, and we would track that, and then I think we said July or August, that would be put out to everyone to, you know, give an update on how much you personally have spent. So that's the chart that you've got. Thank you to our clerks for putting that together. Obviously, in this year, very little has been used because folks have not really been traveling or training. But the process is still the same. So, you know, these people have used a small amount, so everybody has still their main chunk, but we can open that up to other legislators. So if Rich says, I'm not going to use any of my training funds for the next 6 months, Leslie could say, well, can I use part of that because I am going to use it. So it's kind of an update, and we'll need to let the rest of the legislators know that that's where we're at. The other additional thing on this chart is that there's a sort of a miscellaneous column, and Kathy can help correct me, but there was sort of a mix-up, and about $200 was used of our training budget for a couple of staff members to attend the NACO conference. And there would be significant paperwork and trying to figure that out if we wanted to correct that. But in talking with Kathy, we kind of thought it's $200. Maybe we can just eat that from our budget, since not a lot of our budget has been used this year. So, questions on that? The policy from the rules is in there in case you haven't read the rules, which you should. And any questions? Dan?
We're supposed to declare our intention to free up our training money. August, was that the?
I think it's August 1st.
Right, so this is informational, and I guess I should put out an email to everyone letting folks know that they have the next month to consider. There is the, excuse me, the fall NISAC conference, which isn't usually as expensive. But I don't know if you have a sense, Kathy, how much it generally costs for somebody to go.
I don't off the top of my head. I know it's being held in Syracuse. It is in person. I think there'll be some interest from a few legislators, but I don't have any idea what that cost is at this time.
And a reminder that if there's, other trainings that legislators want to attend, if you find something that interests you that is relevant to our work here, you're welcome to come back to this committee and say, I would like to use, some of my funding for that. Rich is laughing.
Well, we went through this whole sort of system, but of course the pandemic intervened. And so it's hard to know whether this new idea was working or not, but
yeah, well, we'll see. All right, so I'll go ahead and send a message out to our colleagues, let them know. I'll send this chart and the information, and we'll go from there. Anything else on that, Rich?
I would just say, I think I'm interested in doing some sort of training. So from the standpoint of advising before August 1st, I think I'd like to reserve my funds.
And then, so one other question, Kathy, this does not roll over. Is that correct? If we don't use this whole budget line this year, we don't get it next year.
No, it becomes part of our rollover. We would have to request it specifically.
Okay, so it becomes part of the legislature budget rollover.
Rollover, correct.
Okay. Okay, all right, great, thank you. Okay, redistricting again. We're gonna probably be talking about this forever. The Mikes and I met, Mike Sigler and Mike Lane, last week, maybe. I put together this memo, which sorry, I only emailed out yesterday. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but I used the memo that Kathy shared with me from 10 years ago, and I sort of updated, I added in what the county charter actually says, so that's in there. And then tried to give some background on what has happened in the past. My understanding is that it was the 2010 census where the legislature shifted their sort of policy and moved to an independent redistricting commission. So prior to that, I don't know what they did, but they actually added it into the county charter that we would convene this independent redistricting commission. So I gave also a little background on what we've been going through in the past year with the census, the delays, the uncertainty, also our numerous discussions about, do we want to change our legislative terms, shorten them, lengthen them, to sort of correspond with the redistricting process. So I did add into the memo, if anyone is interested in what those discussions were, they are in the minutes from several meetings last year. And then ultimately the legislature did not pass any changes. So our terms remain at 4 years. So that means we have plenty of time over the next 4 years to work on the redistricting and get that set in place before our next election, which will be 2025, I guess. But we are getting started on this, and that was the goal of meeting with the Mikes. I like calling them that. And thinking about our process and our plan based on what the charter says. So I'm sorry I don't have page numbers, but so one of the questions, one of the main things that the legislature needs to do is convene this commission. And so we need to decide what is the process for that based on what we've done in the past, based on the charter. We will be putting out information to the public. We'll be looking for 9 members of the public to join this commission. But to do that, they need to apply. So we'll have applications, and then someone will need to hold interviews. So when Mike and I discussed this, we suggested that it would be this committee that is the interview panel. I believe I sent you all an email, but I'm not sure, asking if you'd be willing to do that over the next several months, being on that committee. We do want it to be bipartisan, and Mike Sigler is interested in participating, so we don't want it just to be Democrats. And what that would entail for us would be finding the time to sit down with, might be 15 or 20 applicants, and reading their information and working together to decide who we feel like would be on this commission. We would then send those recommendations to the full legislature, and the legislature would decide to actually appoint those people. So then those people, those 9 people, would be the ones to work with staff, work with consultants. They would be meeting as much as they needed to over the following several months to come up with a plan. That plan would eventually be brought back to, I guess, this committee, but the full legislature for further discussion. So I'll stop there for a moment and just look at my colleagues and see if folks have questions or are willing to serve on the, for lack of a better word, hiring committee. Dan.
Yes, I'm willing to serve on that hiring committee. I did read the memo this morning, and it was like really thorough and really good. And I couldn't find even like one little thing that I was wondering about or, thought differently about. So
Great.
Hopefully other legislators will agree with that assessment. And the only thing I would say right now is, yes, there's not much of a time crunch based on our 4-year election cycle, but we do want to stay in touch with the city redistricting, and that's 2 years. So that's still a lot of time, but just a little less than.
Yeah, definitely. And that does keep coming up. And the Mikes and I talked about that and making sure we're in line with them, but also that's going to be something that the staff is really going to need to do, Greg Potter. And so we do want to make sure that they know what they're doing. And I believe this is Greg's 3rd or 4th one. Yeah. Rich?
Yes, I would certainly be willing to serve. Given the national attention on this issue, making sure we demonstrate that we have a good process that leads to a rational system of districts I think we need to set an example for the state and federal friends. So yes.
Great, thank you. Leslie?
A question about the timeline for the commission itself. I'm guessing this is 2021 work. We probably wouldn't initiate prior to that, mostly because of the census data timing and when we'll get the information that would be critical for these folks to make any decisions.
Yeah, it's a good question, and that,
I'm sorry, 2022, I meant to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
right. And there is a spot at the end of the memo, you know, saying, you know, the commission will bring a plan to the legislature no later than, it's really hard to say what that date will be. But just sort of looking ahead, you know, my thinking is that when we have our sort of interview panel set up, then we'll, you know, work with Dominic to start getting some publicity and figuring out, you know, how we're going to advertise this. I guess my thinking, and the Mikes and I kind of discussed this, you know, our interview panel would work together through the fall. So I know that's a really busy time with budget and everything, but maybe it might be October, November, where we have our list of applicants and we have to set up, you know, meetings with them. At which point, you know, yeah, I mean, we don't get the census data back until September 30th. We don't have to actually do anything with that data ourselves, but, you know, our staff will be starting to work on that. So, you know, timeline is a little, I mean, it may take us a while if we've all got, you know, budget meetings and all that. It may take us a while to schedule the interviews. But I guess my hope is that by the beginning of next year, the commission will be in place and be able to get to work. So thanks. And are you interested in serving on this?
I might be, but timeline matters.
Timeline does matter.
Yeah.
Rich? Yeah, I mean, as you and the Mikes indicated, it would be assigned to GO.
Right.
So, you know, somebody, you lay down your tools, somebody picks them up. I think it makes sense. And frankly, from the standpoint of objectivity, if you're not continuing, that makes you more objective than we are. I mean, somebody has to pick the commission. So
yeah,
you'll do it, but having somebody who's.
I think my only concern, which maybe is Leslie's as well, is that we're in the middle of the interview process at the end of the year. And if you've interviewed some of the people, but not, like, I guess we'll have to see how that goes.
Right. So I might be interested. How about we go?
Okay. So maybe I'll ask colleagues if someone is willing to be a backup person in case the timing changes. Okay. I'll make a note of that.
And just one change to the memo, which is end of the first paragraph. You know, I don't know if you want to, well, it's more about election season and that we're in it right now. If you want to identify how many people, maybe what the changeover looks like coming. At
the introduction part?
Yeah, I think it's helpful for folks to know.
Okay.
What the change is.
So, okay.
Amanda?
Yes.
Not to belabor the point, but given that we do have several legislators who are retiring at the end of the year, they could be drafted to pick the commission as they don't have an interest in an ongoing. You know, if we wanted an alternative to GO. Something to think about.
Okay. I mean, you all seem happy to do it and Mike Sigler was happy. So I think we'll go with that. Well, yeah, I guess they could. That's something, I don't know, that's a fine line. We did talk about that. Could a former elected official apply? And we didn't have a strong answer, but we definitely felt like, I don't know, recent elected officials, that might be, I don't know, that might be a little bit challenging, but maybe if someone was an elected official 10 years ago, So I'm not sure there's an actual rule about that. Okay, so that's, and I will also give our colleagues an update on that. Okay. Okay, we have a report discussion on return to in-person chambers meetings. I'm not sure who's talking about that. I don't see Dominic here. Is that you, Lisa? Or is there, what is there, or is this when we were supposed to talk about the advisory board?
I think so.
Okay.
I think that was
Okay.
in the announcement that I sent out after
Okay.
hearing the lifting of the governor's, all of the restrictions. The only outstanding question had to do with advisory boards.
Okay, thanks. I wasn't putting it together that was this. So I assume you all saw Lisa's message. Obviously, we're here in person, so you know you have to be here in person. But technically, it's not the law that our advisory boards meet in person, but that has been our county policy. So I'd assume, I think you guys were all on emails from a couple of constituents who, from the EMC, who are very interested in being able to have a hybrid option or to just meet on Zoom. So the question before us, I believe, is how do we feel about our advisory boards having this option to continue to meet either hybrid or continue to be on Zoom? And if so, would we need to actually change the policy? We would need to actually change the policy. Okay, Leslie.
I would like to advocate that we allow for advisory boards, commissions to meet hybrid remotely. It will help us to keep a robust group of folks able to access meetings. Personally, I think that a lot of these boards and commissions utilize spaces that are available, and that has not necessarily turned on as quickly. So asking people to pivot fast when they don't know if they can get into a space, if there are going to be different requirements on those spaces, is kind of an immediate issue. But long-term, I know that it's a challenge to keep folks that want to and can participate in a meaningful way, as well as balancing all of life's other needs. So I think it's, if it's not an onerous task, if it's not costing a ton of money, if we can enable folks to have better accessibility, it's a win.
I agree with all that. And I just add a side note that we should be thinking about, for our committee meetings and full legislature, systematizing what we've done today with staff being able to participate remotely or in person, depending on need, but that we can try to get to a point where staff doesn't have to sit here and wait through a long meeting.
So I definitely agree with the concept. And our legislature and committee meetings are in this room, and we're all set up, and the support staff are trained, everything's good. But how do the advisory committees work? Where are they meeting? Who's operating this equipment? So that's my question.
So I think probably it would be good to, and I'd be willing to have some further discussion about this with our department heads, because for the most part, advisory committees have been meeting all remotely, and so they've been able to do that thus far, which only requires that department heads have computer equipment, and so do advisory committee members. So the question would be, I would imagine that we would want to tell department heads to enable an in-person option if possible, and if that's someone's choice to come in, or if they don't have connectivity, but to also allow for the hybrid option. And it would be a question as to, do all departments have that type of equipment at their disposal to offer? Those are the two things that come to my mind. And then just so I believe you're all aware, there are 3 advisory committees that are in particular subject to open meetings law for whom this would not apply.
Yeah, there are way more than three. There's three. We had one like just yesterday, which is like the Ethics Advisory Board is one. You have to look at each committee. In fact, you mentioned EMC. EMC might be subject to open meetings law anyway.
Pardon me, we can't hear Jonathan. Thank you.
What I was saying is there's well more than three advisory board committees that are subject to the open meetings law. You have to kind of go through each one. But for example, this week we had the Ethics Advisory Board meeting, which is subject to the open meetings law. We just mentioned EMC. I'm not sure, but my guess is EMC probably is. But there are several more than just three.
And where is that spelled out?
So it's spelled out currently in the policy. So so maybe Jonathan, in the meantime, for the next meeting, if you want to go through.
Yeah, that would be weird because we got like 50 of them.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard. So the law is essentially that committees that are purely advisory, have no powers at all, no real powers at all, are not subject to the open meetings law. We call a lot of things advisory committees that are not really advisory, that are not purely advisory, but have some actual powers. And those that have some actual powers under law are subject to the open meetings law, have to go through. So EMCs are established by state law, for example. So you have to go through the state law. And I think they probably do have some real powers. And they probably, I mean, this is off the top of my head, probably are subject to the open meetings law. But you have to go through each one. It's not, I mean, you know, the three that were mentioned, I actually changed the wording in that thing where, you know, in the draft that went out from Lisa, eliminating the word all, but, you know, there are definitely some advisory committees that we have that are purely advisory and that are not subject to the open meetings law other than by our policy. But there are others more than the three that are subject to open meetings law by state law.
Okay. Anne, did you have your hand up?
Yes, so there's a number of committees or advisory boards that report to Peak, and for instance, Case Board, I'm seeing a lot of traffic via email. Case Board has said they're going to try and meet in person for July, although they meet later in the month. EMC, their next meeting is the 8th, and I talked to some of the members on there, and they don't know how they're going to pivot to be able to do an in-person meeting on the 8th. I personally told them I'm not going to push it. So I would like some advice from this committee or, you know, and Jonathan, that, I mean, can we just kind of let them continue to meet for next week? Or can we just not say anything? You know?
I think we already have. You know, I mean, the plain truth is the open meetings law is the open meetings law, and they're subject to it or they're not. Certainly, we can suspend our policy indefinitely, but we can't suspend open meetings law.
So I would jump in and lose my train of thought. I serve on the Cooperative Extension Board and on the Finance Subcommittee of that board. That's not related to us, but we had a Finance Committee meeting yesterday, which is subject to open meetings law. And we met on Zoom, and therefore the decisions we made were not binding. They were recommendations to the full board. So because we didn't have that capacity to suddenly meet in person. Personally, I would be fine with taking another month, figuring this out, asking Jonathan to take some time and let us know which ones are legally bound. In the meantime, as if they are still meeting on Zoom, they won't be able to take official action. And if they do vote on something, you know, they're like something even simple as the minutes, they would probably have to go back and vote on those minutes at the following meeting. Because you're right, Anne. I mean, I think, most of these people are volunteers. We need to figure out, as Dan said, do we have equipment? How is this going to happen? And there are so many, and they all are different, which is our next conversation. So I
Can I
guess
just add one more thing before we finish the
Sure.
discussion? So as people might have been, I don't know if you had time to read some of the emails, but talking with some of these folks that have approached me, for instance, EMC, they could lose quite a number of their members, maybe more than half of their members who have been able to attend and be active during this. And I'm not saying it all has to do with us. I told them to, send us emails, also include Anna Kellis. This needs to be addressed on a state issue. But EMC, for instance, if they were able to meet, remotely, I can tell them that their decisions won't be binding in July. They're not meeting in August, so that would give them a little bit more time. So I appreciate that.
Dan.
I would be happy to make a motion right now, if it would be well received, to move that we suspend the county's open meetings policy for 1 month. It's not passed by the legislature, so it's not real, but it at least kind of
Hey, we're in person, so this is real.
real-ish. But at least it's a message of what our intention is. If that's, where people are open to that idea.
Would there be a second for that?
Yeah, I'm worried that we're saying we are not going to follow state law.
Our county open meetings policy. We can't suspend state law.
Or specifically for advisory boards?
Well, I mean, give me a minute.
Okay.
I don't know, Jonathan, jump in if you want, but I think if we suspend our open meetings policy, we're obviously everyone's still subject to the state law, but we're sending the message that those that aren't subject to state law can take a break if they want. To be or not to be.
Yeah, I guess I'm uncomfortable there. If we could maybe further clarify that advisory boards could continue to meet for purposes of sharing information and perhaps making advisory decisions that are non-binding.
Yeah, I think that would have to be spelled out. Jonathan, Leslie.
Well, I mean, I think the whole issue is, so there are organizations, including this committee, which are governed by the state open meetings law, which includes some things that we call advisory committees, but have actual powers. And then there are purely advisory committees, and those purely advisory committees are not subject to the open meetings law. They're only subject to our policy. If we didn't have a policy at all, there'd still be several of what we call advisory committees that would be subject to open meetings law. And I think, that maybe our policy creates a little confusion because there were a few, like 3 named ones, but those ones actually asked to be listed as not subject, but that wasn't really the exclusive list of those. And it never really came up as being that particularly important because everybody was following it anyway. But, if we're going to have a separate policy where some advisory boards don't have to follow the open meetings law, then we really need to identify which ones those are and which ones those aren't. Whereas before it didn't really matter.
Leslie.
Right. We're going to have to be clear with what we're sharing with folks about what the expectations are depending on their participation. People participate in multiple boards, commissions to understand where they're going to be required to convene in person to comply with state law, and or if we want to say all advisory boards and commissions feel free to coordinate and meet as best you can, recognizing we'd still have to tell folks what the expectation was. But if you cannot comply because of logistics or people's comfort level at this moment, then feel free to make non-binding decisions in the month of July, minimally. or until you can comply with, and we need to share like an exhaustive list of who has to comply.
So it sounds like you might be seconding Dan's suggestion, motion.
Can you repeat?
Well, his motion was to temporarily suspend the county policy for advisory boards on whether they can meet. I mean, not,
Maybe I'm just saying I think people will need more information than that to know what that actually means
Right.
for them in their participation.
okay. So this is very confusing. I think, my feeling is that we need to be flexible over the next month, as we have been trying to be patient and flexible for the past 18 months, and give people time to figure it out. I'm not sure that we can, without the information that Jonathan is suggesting that we need, which is that each advisory board is different and is subject to different laws and rules. I'm not sure we can sort of make a blanket statement. I guess I also think that in the part of the question is right now, what do we tell them? But part of the question is, in August and beyond, how are we going to allow these advisory boards to meet? The ones that are not bound by state law. And, some may have to go back to in-person meetings, in which case they may lose members and they'll have to recruit new members, unfortunately. So I know that people got used to the hybrid model, and if we're able to provide that legally and practically, then it makes sense to do that. If we can't, then we can't. So all that said, what do we do? Dan.
Not exactly sure what to do. I mean, I had that one suggestion, but I guess what I think we should do is be sending the message to the advisory boards that there's no police that are going to come knocking on their, and looking through their minutes. That was my attempt to do that. I guess that's all I want to do. I want to, decide today, figure out a way to send that message. That if the EMC, as an example, is not ready to meet next Thursday, take yourself a month of Zoom and, no one's, and not such a bad thing.
Jonathan, can I ask if you have time over the next month to work on this, to bring us information about who is, or just someone else, who would be the person to do that?
I mean, I can look at that. I mean, we do have like 50 or so entities on the list. Some of them are going to be really easy, but there's a whole bunch of them which may be really not easy. You have to kind of look into what exactly their duties are under law, et cetera, to figure out whether, there are certain advisory opinions that the State Committee on Open Government has on various ones. In fact, there was one on the Ethics Advisory Board. Freeman said it was subject to the open meetings law, but there are not on a lot of different ones. So, but I'd be happy to look at it, but I'm not sure I have an answer for all 50.
Right.
Certainly some of them are going to be fairly straightforward. I will say that, like, for example, EMC, and I haven't looked into that at all, but I know it's established by state law. And if there are any duties in there that are actual duties, probably it's subject to the open meeting law, if it's not purely advisory.
So I'm comfortable with what Dan is suggesting, that we try to be flexible in this next month. I guess I don't want to come to next month and say we don't have an answer or a decision. I would want us to be able to, the options are that we say they have to follow our policy. This is our policy. They have to follow it. Or we try to come up with a new policy. So So, Lisa,
So Kathy just raised a point that in the policy itself, that advisory committees shall be made open to the public. And that could be interpreted to mean that you share the Zoom link with them, rather than make them subject in the same way as we all here are subject to open meetings law. So there's that piece to consider too. And then so it does seem like establishing which by statute are open or subject to open meetings law is a first step. The other is, will the departments have sufficient time to make these arrangements? So I'm comfortable, communicating this with department heads and bringing it up at the next department head meeting, maybe bringing some suggested policy language back to GO for the next meeting. So we keep moving forward.
okay, that sounds great. Any other thoughts? Okay, so through the department heads, they will get the word to their advisory boards.
Yes, and this was communicated to them last week as well. The same day that I communicated to you all about the changes, I sent that in communication to department heads. So they were aware that, that this discussion is happening and they've been thinking about it.
So in the meantime, for this committee, over the next month, maybe you can all be considering, what do you want the policy to look like going forward? Do you feel like we should change the policy to, for the future, that we are going to try to figure out how to allow them to have hybrid meetings? Or do we want to eventually get back to only being in person? So that's a question for the future. Good? Okay. Thank you, Lisa and Jonathan, for helping us figure that out. Continuing on the advisory board topic, which I'm not sure how much we need to say right now, but, and we are getting towards the end of our time here. Dan and I met with Kathy and Michelle and Brittany a couple weeks ago to talk about our advisory boards in general and the bigger picture. It is a monumental task for our legislative clerks to deal with these 50 or so advisory boards who all have different bylaws, they have different terms, they have different number of people, they have different rules and regulations about where they meet and when they meet and all that kind of stuff. Their applications, there is out in the world software that would help clerks to, keep this this huge task to a more manageable amount of time, but they have been unable to utilize this because of the very many challenges and the great variety in all our advisory boards. There have been attempts in past years to try to streamline things, which have not always gone well. And there's lots of information which we probably don't need to share with everybody just yet. But to make their lives easier, we're thinking it is time to take a closer look at our boards, ask some questions, look at the details, and see how we can help make this task easier. So Dan and Rich and I are gonna have another awesome subcommittee, and we're gonna start looking at these things. One of the most simple things that Kathy and our clerks are gonna bring to us is there's a couple of advisory boards that don't even meet anymore, don't have any members, and we're gonna have a resolution to just abolish them. So we won't have them. So that's like the most basic, simple thing that we're gonna be able to do. But that's just the beginning. And they brought us a whole list of, tasks and things that we can change and ideas for, some will be somewhat easy, Some will be more difficult. We'll have to be in contact with, chairs of the advisory boards to ask questions and all that kind of thing. So we're looking at kind of a longer ongoing process. And I guess I would say to Rich and Dan, we'll set up a meeting, kind of look at the big picture, and we would come back to this committee sort of periodically with ideas or resolutions and obviously working closely with Kathy and Brittany and Michelle. Michelle put an amazing amount of time into collecting data, putting it into documents that make sense, identifying problems. It's amazing. So there's a lot of problems. So that's sort of the basic rundown. Any thoughts or questions about that? Or anything else that you want to add, Kathy or Brittany?
I don't think so. The only thing I guess I will add is that there are no two advisory boards alike. So
and that makes it very difficult to maintain
training,
right.
Finding a program that would help with the appointment process. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will add one thing is that, like all of you, having been on some advisory boards, that kind of get the feeling that they're not really contributing a lot of valuable information to the process. But we have them, I think, I don't know, I'm speculating, but I think because it sounds right? We want citizen involvement and we want to hear from people in the field. So we set up I think this is, I wasn't there, but I think this is the reason that a lot of these things got set up. But I'm not sure that they're really useful. So I also think we should take a hard look at maybe, getting rid of or combining some things. The city went through that process a few years ago. It was a very painful process for them. Not sure what they ended up with was more productive or not. And maybe we won't get anywhere doing this, but I think it's worth taking a hard look at it.
Asking hard questions. Rich?
Yeah, I think we'll find that some advisory boards are doing productive things and others probably aren't. I point to CJATI, which I think has really helped us in terms of coordinating across all the different agencies that get involved with alternatives to incarceration and making sure information is shared in a comprehensive way that you couldn't really accomplish without an advisory board. But yes, others I think are not really the best use of the people's time that are participating.
Hope I didn't imply in any way that we should get rid of all of it.
No, but I think that's part of what we should be looking at is the functionality on a case-by-case basis. I agree.
I'd also like to say that we should engage our department directors to find out, what they're getting value from particular advisory groups, as well as thinking about if advisory groups have provided information to committees or are committees potentially not utilizing a commission or a board that could be better utilized. While we're asking these questions, let's ask them of all the participants.
Definitely. Okay, Rich and Dan, I'll reach out and as long as Dan brings pie. Cookies?
Hey, rules fest lives.
Those lemon cookies or orange glazed cookies are really good. Okay, so one other thing from me that I've been thinking about, and you guys can tell me I'm crazy or not. We are having probably 5 new members coming next year. Something that I never got as a new legislator was, there was sort of the basic HR onboarding, but there was never sort of a basic legislature onboarding. And so I love doing stuff like this. So I'm thinking, maybe I'll just make a short document of information for our new folks, like the fact that, our clerks can get you business cards, or here's where you park, or basic stuff like that. Leslie?
I'll participate. I have thoughts.
Okay. and it wouldn't necessarily be like rules or anything. It's just sort of, ideas of things that sort of practical things that, people might benefit from. And if that makes sense, I'll, we have time, I'll put a little time into that. Leslie looks very excited about that.
I think it would be a great big help. And for any of the new legislators coming on that have never worked for the county, worked with the county, been on an advisory board, they're going to need a lot of help. So let's make it easy.
Yeah, and I think also things like, I didn't know how a meeting ran. I mean, and it does, the rules of the legislature sort of has, a lot of information, but the fact that you raise your hand and wait your turn, just sort of basic stuff like that, that maybe people don't know, so that's just a little pet project of mine, and people seem okay with that. And then one other thing is that, yes, another subcommittee, we have lots of little subcommittees right now. Leslie and Rich and I are going to be meeting to talk about what a code of conduct might look like. Certainly, we're not going to create anything that's binding. It would have to come back to the full legislature, but talk about some ideas. Is this a good idea, a bad idea? What do other counties do, or what do other boards do? And just sort of explore that idea. And I know that that has also been explored in the past, but we're three different people who can bring up some ideas there. All right, I'm going to stop and let's go through if we have any reports from our important folks, and then we're about out of time. So Lisa, is there anything else you want to tell us about today?
In the time-honored tradition of Jonathan Wood, no report.
Thank you. Jonathan Wood.
You too. We're important people.
Excellent. Director of Finance, Rick Snyder. Hello.
Only two brief updates for you as we finish our review of the final draft of the financial statements. We only have today and tomorrow yet to review the final draft, so we're on a tight timeline. But I will have room tax revenue figures for you at the next legislative meeting. I saw Nick Hemhole and Lisa Shaw working together on the data, and it looks like they've finished their collection, and we should be putting the report together next week. So I pretty much am sure that you'll be getting the next quarterly room tax revenue report at your next legislative meeting. I did want to share the auction dates that we have moved the auction to this year. So I'm going to share my screen real quickly here to show you. As you're aware, are you seeing this auction date?
Yes.
It was originally scheduled for August 16th, and now it's scheduled for October 25th. This is the first auction we've had since 2019 because it got moved 3 times last year, you'll remember, and then finally it was canceled. And we just said we're not going to be able to have one last year. So then those auction properties have moved into this year's foreclosure list. And so a combined auction was scheduled, as you can see here, for August 16th. All those dates have been X'd out for when we pour the properties, and the last day to pay, the pre-auction meeting, and the actual auction dates were all eradicated when the governor extended his moratorium on foreclosures on properties, including tax foreclosures. So, and we've rescheduled this a couple times. We feel pretty certain now, knowing that the moratorium runs out on August 31st, that these dates in red are pretty good to go. So we scheduled our August 30th tour of the properties, whereby I visit each property owner and give them a notice letter. That's the last letter that they get that they can still redeem their properties. The last day to pay has been extended to September 15th. The pre-auction meeting, which is a meeting held by the auctioneer at the site we will choose to have this auction. It's always a week ahead of the auction. And that's scheduled for Monday, October 18th. And they simply go over all the properties and they talk to people who have never gone to an auction before, give them a little primer on how to attend and bid at an auction. And then the big and final day is Monday, October 25th, and that will be the auction. I thought I'd give you these dates, knowing that you'll be hearing from Darby Kiley at next month's GO meeting. That is the time they've asked to be able to come to you to make their presentation and recommendations on what properties, if any, to pull from the auction. That was postponed from April to May, from May to June to July, and now finally to August. So I'm pretty committed that Darby Kiley and I will be able to present these properties to you with our recommendation on which ones, if any, are to be pulled from the auction. So that'll be at your next GO committee. And that's all I have. Any questions on this?
I don't see any questions.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much, Rick. Excellent. Any other reports or comments from committee members today? Dan.
Quick. I've been thinking about our property half block away at the dental building and the parking that we have there. And there were some rules that were put together, previous county administrator. There was some parking enforcement that was done, but then the pandemic seemed to have stopped all that. And so I would like to take this topic up and have it talk about a few ideas. But my question is that a GO thing or is that a downtown facilities thing? Does downtown facilities even meet, are they even meeting?
Right. Well, I feel like we've talked about parking here before. Do you all want to talk about it?
Not now.
Right now.
I think it would be helpful to know if downtown facilities is meeting and talking about it. This is obviously the logistics and operations of the site, different from,
What they're doing with
potential for,
Well, it's a little bit about policy though, Tim. It could land in either one. I mean, I'm not attached.
Jonathan, do you have a thought?
Well, I have a general thought that the whole issue of who is responsible for parking, like, put aside what the rule is, who exactly is going to enforce it, who's responsible. I think that's an issue.
Okay.
That's our experience, let's put it that way.
I'm happy to have that conversation here. Next month, who's the chair of downtown facilities? Dave. I can reach out to Dave and see if that's something that he would want to talk about. And if he's like, no, go ahead, then we can put it on the agenda do you want to talk about it next month?
That's fine with me if there's room on the agenda. I
Okay.
can also put down a couple paragraphs and send them around just so you know what I'm thinking about.
Okay, that would be great. Anything else from committee members? Okay, thank you all. Good meeting. We are.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thanks.